Welcome to this explainer. You know, when we picture the Maldives, we're probably imagining pristine overwater villas, crystal clear lagoons, and just absolute effortless serenity, right? It looks perfect, almost magical. But today, we're pulling back the curtain on paradise. We're going to uncover the massive, totally invisible logistical engine that actually keeps this beautiful illusion running smoothly.
So what does it really take to run paradise? Because a luxury resort out here, it's not just a hotel. When you're floating out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, you aren't plugging into a municipal power grid, and you definitely aren't relying on a local grocery store down the street. A Maldivian resort is actually a highly complex, completely self-sufficient microcity. It's operating in literally one of the most remote, logistically challenging, and ecologically fragile environments on Earth. To maintain that flawless five-star facade you see in the brochures, the invisible operations happening just beneath the surface have to be engineered to absolute perfection.
To break this all down, we're going to look at 5 key areas. First, the illusion itself. Second, logistics and transfers. Third, what it actually takes to run a microcity. Fourth, the human element. And finally, sustainability and survival. Let's jump right in.
Okay, part 1, the illusion, selling the Maldivian dream.
On the surface, digital marketing sells us absolute serenity. We've all seen those sweeping drone shots of turquoise waters, the Instagram-perfect wellness retreats, and signature experiences like private, sunset sandbank dinners. But underneath, the reality demands rigorous, uncompromising operational precision. That seamless sandbank dinner requires unbreakable cold chain integrity just to keep imported luxury ingredients fresh while they're crossing the ocean. It demands strict HACCP food safety standards and super meticulous weekly stock audits. The magic you experience on vacation is entirely dependent on the uncompromising math and science happening behind the scenes.
Moving on to part 2, logistics and transfers, the movement network.
To a guest, arriving at their island feels like this breezy, picturesque seaplane ride, but in reality, it's a rigid, multi-layered operational protocol. The clock starts ticking the literal second a guest lands at the international airport in Malé. Step 1 is the VIP arrival. You have teams tracking international flights in real time, catching delays or handling lost luggage crises before the guest even realizes there's a problem. Then Step 2 is the transfer control room. Think of this as a mini air traffic control center, constantly battling sudden weather shifts and coordinating passenger movement. And Step 3, dispatch. For seaplanes, they use dynamic flight batching, grouping guests together to avoid burning thousands of dollars on empty fuel runs. For speedboats, it means managing a private fleet with GPS tracking and dynamic scheduling. It's a massive daily puzzle just to get people to the front door.
All right, part 3, running a microcity, the engine room.
Think about how hard it is to plan your grocery list for just 1 week. Now imagine doing it for a small town, 16 weeks in advance. Because of their extreme isolation, resorts can't just order supplies for next Tuesday. To survive, these micro-cities rely on a staggering rolling supply chain forecast of 12 to 16 weeks. Every single grain of rice, every spare light bulb, and every bottle of champagne has to be accounted for months before it's ever actually needed.
Imagine the timeline of a single order. If it's placed on day 0, the resort absolutely must maintain a 30 to 45-day buffer stock of critical items just to keep the island alive while that order is processed, shipped, and ferried across the sea. They categorize every single piece of inventory into critical, essential, and non-essential buckets, using sophisticated RFID tracking. If a specialized generator part breaks, you can't just run to the hardware store. If a specific luxury ingredient runs out, there's no emergency delivery service. That buffer stock is the literal lifeblood of the island's operations.
And the sheer engineering required to sustain life out here is just incredible. You are your own municipal utility company. That means relying on massive hybrid power systems, balancing heavy-duty diesel generators with expanding solar arrays and immense battery banks. For water, resorts run giant reverse osmosis plants. They pull in seawater, desalinate it, and critically ensure they always have 7 to 10 days of emergency drinking water on standby at all times. And because nothing simply goes away on an island, waste management has to be aggressive. They use energy-efficient segregation at the source, on-island composting for organic waste, and scheduled off-island barge disposal for recyclables.
Which brings us to part 4, the human element, service and staff. Predicting a guest's dietary allergies or curating specialized marine biology sessions is really only half the equation. The other half is battling island fever. Staff turnover can absolutely cripple a resort. That's why workforce management is treated as an absolute operational imperative. To maintain high morale and flawless service, the resort has to provide comfortable housing, recreational facilities, and critical lifelines like high-speed Wi-Fi to keep staff connected to their families. They also focus heavily on leadership development, cross-training so the island isn't dependent on single individuals, and building clear career pathways for local Maldivian staff. You simply cannot deliver world-class luxury without a highly supported, deeply motivated team.
Now, all of this massive infrastructure creates immense financial pressure, and it's dominated by the big three cost centers: energy, food and beverage, and transport. When you have to generate every single watt of your own electricity, import almost every calorie of food across an ocean, and run your own private aviation and maritime fleets just to get customers to your island, your margins are going to be razor thin. Resorts have to rely on sophisticated dynamic pricing models and strategic pre-arrival upselling just to offset these massive baseline costs.
Finally, we arrive at Part 5, Sustainability and Survival.
In the Maldives, resilience isn't some corporate buzzword. It's active, daily preparation for disaster. They're actively building elevated infrastructure to combat rising tides and rogue waves. They maintain super strict storm protocols and distributed emergency kits. They run independent, fully stocked on-island clinics. And to protect against global supply chain disruptions, they actively cultivate alternative supplier networks and maintain deep emergency stockpiles, literally so they can survive being totally cut off from the rest of the world for weeks if a crisis hits.
But true survival also means protecting their single greatest asset: the environment itself. Resorts are fighting back against import dependency by building hydroponic farms right on the sand to grow their own fresh greens and herbs. They're aggressively expanding their solar power footprints to reduce their reliance on imported diesel fuel. And to protect the house reef, the vibrant underwater world that draws guests in the first place, they enforce strict reef-safe sunscreen policies alongside active, ongoing coral restoration projects led by full-time, on-site marine biologists.
I want to leave you with this final thought to wrap up our explainer. We often define luxury as gold leaf desserts or high thread count sheets. But in the Maldives, the ultimate luxury isn't the perfect ocean view. It's resilience. It's the invisible army of reverse osmosis plants, complex supply chains, and dedicated staff keeping the island afloat against all odds. When you look at the immense, unending effort required to sustain life in this remote environment, you really have to ask yourself, as the climate shifts and global logistics become more volatile, can the micro-cities survive tomorrow? Thank you for joining me, and keep asking those big questions.